Quickly, what's your favorite shoe brand? Preferred cosmetic company? Favorite Taylor Swift album? Do you believe that US military intervention helps support democracy abroad? Now wait a minute. One of these things is not like the other. Well, or is it? Hey guys, what's up? It's Imurgency and welcome back to my channel. And yes, let's address the elephant in the room really quickly. I do have little twisties. This is a new development. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly to do with them. So if you do have recommendations for what I should do with these little twists, style them a little bit more, let me know in the comments below. So for right now, they're dude down. But getting back to what we were just talking about, the reason why I ask all these questions is because it's important to understand what it is that makes us have the opinions that we do on these things. While we'd like to believe that it's our own autonomy and free will, I'm sorry to tell you that a lot of whatever you may have answered to those questions has been shaped, molded, and dare I say, even manipulated by propaganda that's all around us. And I know that sounds spooky and really doomeristic, but hear me out, because in this video, we're going to be going over propaganda and its relation to modern day advertisements, as well as getting into the conversation around Taylor Swift's new album, Life of a Showgirl, and how it could be seen that much of it, that being the album itself and its marketing, actually also is propaganda. So first and foremost, we got to talk about what exactly is propaganda. Now, I feel like we've all heard this term used, usually in a political sense, and that's honestly the most common use for sure. When you traditionally hear that something's propaganda, you think of things that are trying to get you to think a certain way about something political, something trying to sway your opinion one way or another, and usually in a very insidious way. And if you've been paying attention to current events in America, you can definitely see that the word propaganda has been thrown around a lot, and there has been a lot of it in that sense. But the actual textbook definition of propaganda is the dissemination of information, facts, arguments, rumors, half-truths, or lies to influence public opinion, and it is often conveyed through mass media. And if you apply this definition broadly, it actually is a core tenet of branding, marketing, and public relations. I think as a public, we've definitely separated the two and see propaganda as a more nefarious and sinister thing, which in some cases it definitely can be, but it can also be applied to things we don't see as sinister as, say, fascism. It also applies to the ads that we see in our day-to-day, whether it be for that creepy AI friend device, which I do have to plug, I did make a whole video about on my second channel, Imurgency 2, if you do want to go check that out, definitely go do that. Or for things like cereal or your favorite shoes. Marketing, branding, advertising, whatever you want to call it, at its core, has the same mission that propaganda does: to disseminate information, whether it's the full truth, half-truth, or not, to sway public opinion and perception. Believe it or not, I am a comms major, guys, so we are going to get a little comms and PR here. So if we're talking about things like propaganda and PR, the conversation has to start with a man named Edward Bernays. Now, Edward Bernays is considered the father of public relations, or PR, and also propaganda, because he wrote a whole book on it. And this story is actually going to take us all the way back to World War I. I know, spooky times. But during World War I, we really kicked in the propaganda machine because America needed to boost morale to support war efforts. So they created the Committee on Public Information. And when they did this, they brought on Edward Bernays to join them to maximize their joint propaganda sleigh, to create messaging that might sound a little familiar today. Does US military intervention will spread democracy abroad ring any bells to anyone? Anyways, after this experience, he opened his own PR office, and he himself said that because propaganda got such a bad rep after the war, he had to think of other words to essentially do the same thing, and those words became public relations. The rebranding of propaganda, if you will. Also, a little fun fact for the history and psychology nerds, Bernays is actually Sigmund Freud's nephew. You know, the Sigmund Freud that's like the father of psychology, and for some reason that just makes sense in a way that I don't know that I like. Given this background, he was the first to apply sociology and psychology to commercial and corporate business. His whole tactic was to take an insight that's already governing people's behavior and connect it to the product that you're selling, effectively using people's desires and behaviors to get them to want the specific product that you want them to. And actually, if you want to do a little nepotism funner fact, his great nephew, I know, followed the family tree, was actually the former CEO of Netflix. So really, this also kind of makes sense. Now, I gotta think that this is propaganda podcast for this one, but one of Bernays' most widely known public relations feats was bringing in women as a demographic for cigarettes, more specifically for the brand Lucky Strike. During that time, it was seen as taboo for women to smoke. But for Lucky Strike, that was a whole market that they were missing out on. So of course, at the time, taking the insight that feminism was on the rise and hey, women actually want rights, they said, let's use that. He then staged a march called Torches of Free that essentially captured the desires of women to be equal to men, but tied it to the cigarette. The whole march was women smoking outside, and he even had his assistant go out and give interviews where she would not name a company but would pose as a feminist activist, saying that women deserve the right to smoke and take a break, that women can do what men do, and in this case, that it being smoking. Additionally, in other marketing, they targeted women's desire for thinness, using cigarettes' hunger-curbing side effects, and insisting that women reach for a cigarette instead of dessert. I know, that sounds crazy now, but at the time, they must have been eaten because those ads worked. And it's honestly crazy, like if you look at women's magazines from the 70s, almost all the cigarette ads mention weight loss or slimness, which is clearly the play with these magazines targeting women. And that association clearly runs deep, especially when you consider that this all started around the early 30s. Ideas are as effective as any weapon and could be more dangerous than bullets. But now that we got a little propaganda history lesson, and we've seen how propaganda has been used for not so great reasons, it's time to ask the question, can propaganda actually be good? Or at least positive? I mean, on an interpersonal level, I don't think so, because its purpose is to push a certain agenda, regardless of true authenticity or beliefs. And it's tricky to think in these terms because the basis of propaganda is influencing people to believe, behave, and consume in a certain way for capitalism. But it also is almost impossible to exist outside of that system. Even if we did think of propaganda as like a neutral thing in the hands of the American people can quickly turn into an evil thing because, of course, how we choose to use it. Overwhelmingly, how we use propaganda can be downright evil to secretly insidious, like endlessly promoting the same product that was likely made with labor on TikTok Shop. And while the vast majority of propaganda is sinister, let us remember that not all propaganda is created equal. Like, yeah, swaying people through subliminal messaging or tactics of deceit is never great, but hey, if I have to choose between endless shadow work TikTok Shop ads and being subconsciously swayed to smoke cigarettes, one is definitely worse than the other, but neither are truly great. And it's really important to have discernment over which propaganda is genuinely harmful or maybe just a nuisance. And I really think about how often we as Gen Z are actively advertised to. Like, you really can't escape any form of advertisement. You open any app and within a few swipes, you're already seeing an advertisement for a product that's either paid for by the brand, from the brand, or being promoted by an influencer. And honestly, that's being lenient because if we're also talking about just general product placement, it doesn't just stop at influencers. It also extends to your own social network, like your friends that post the products that they're using. Just ads, whether they're paid for or not. Then you step outside and see advertisements everywhere on billboards, buses, cars, buildings, bus stops, subways, like everything you think of, like there's constant advertisement and propaganda being thrown your way, which for one is already overwhelming for a generation that has decision fatigue. And two, almost the more sinister thing is that the irony of it all is that like you don't really have a choice to begin with. It's all the illusion of choice. Now you may be asking, Remy, what do you mean by this? Let me point you over to a famous case study between Dove and Axe. If you were born before, let's say the year 2004, do you remember this ad? It came out around 2006 and was considered revolutionary at the time for the way that it exposed the industry. And to be fair, at the time, it kind of was. It garnered public favor on their side for their Dove Real Beauty campaign. And if you go see it, Dove's ads did seemingly celebrate diversity, but in that very same year, Axe aired this ad. And it wasn't just that one, they have many other egregious offenses, where women seem to be a prop for men's likability and desirability, but only if they use Axe, of course. Now you may be asking, Remy, what does a Dove ad and an Axe ad have to do with each other? Well, again, let's go back to the family tree. Both of these companies are owned by Unilever. Right. So ultimately, whether you believe that all women should be celebrated as they are, or you think that they're objects that should run around in bikinis in the woods, either way, you lose and they win. They don't care about beliefs. They care about profits. And this is just one of the examples of advertisements and brands playing both sides, talking out of both sides of their mouths to get the most amount of profit. And this is why I say that you don't really have a choice either way. Propaganda has long been a mirror for culture, using people's beliefs and values to sway them. And you can see that in those two ads and who their target demos seem to be. In the early 2000s, low rise was in fashion, thin was in, and it was honestly undeniable. Dove released that ad at a very particular and almost strategic time, where women were probably tired of seeing these unrealistic beauty standards plastered all around them. And Dove seemingly allowed audiences to get a peek behind the curtain to the authentic experience of how inauthentic the industry actually was, thus swinging into the public's good graces. They mirrored the values and desires of their intended audience, that they too fit the descriptions of beauty, not just the models that we see on billboards, because those models are not real. Well, simultaneously, under a sister company, I guess, simultaneously the messaging behind the Axe commercials taps into their audience's desires and beliefs, showing that this product can turn you into a ladies' man, hungered for by all these beautiful, skinny women in bathing suits, which again is kind of in contrast to what they're saying over at Dove. But it's also important to see that these both exist under the same parent company, selling similar products, meaning that the money's all basically going to the same place. And when capital is king, there are no values or morals, just assimilating to what your audience wants to be chosen over the hundreds of other products that are just like yours. There's a sort of identity politics to marketing. Companies change their campaigns and so-called beliefs based solely on their audience behaviors and desires, instead of actually adopting and establishing their own. And this kind of brings me to my next point that branches into the larger conversation that was happening online around the overconsumption with Influencergate, if y'all were on TikTok for that, and talking specifically about how propaganda has changed in the era of social media. Now, it used to be that propaganda reflected our culture and beliefs at the time, but with the rise of social media, it seems that propaganda has begun to actually inform our culture and beliefs. That's why all the nicheification and line blurring of genre and subculture seems to be so shallow these days. Buy a velvet skirt and a bell sleeve top and all of a sudden your limb's a goth. Get a plaid skirt or light wash baggy jean with an oversized collegiate jacket and all of a sudden you're preppy. Culture isn't created from the arts, the community, history, or genuinely people anymore. It's created as a commodity that you can buy off of the TikTok shop. It doesn't really feel like we dictate culture anymore. It feels like we're just trying to acquire it and then move on. Just think of all the times on TikTok every time it's a new season, and you have endless videos of people saying oh, hey guys, what are we wearing to work this fall? What are we wearing this summer? What colors are we wearing? And I can go on to how that speaks to the whole monoculture of it all that we're living right now, but that's a whole separate video. I think I actually did make a whole video on that. You should go check that out. But how does this all apply to now? Well, there's been some internet discourse for a while now about how people are tired of seeing ads all the time.
I am not staying and watching your video if I see the TikTok shop icon in the bottom left corner.
Overconsumption has been plaguing our generation a lot, especially since the rise in fast fashion.
And constantly being sold something every time they open social media. Like I said before, everything you see, especially on social media, it feels like almost always are ads, whether you know it or not. My researcher wanted to add a little note here, saying that while she was researching, she was actually duped into watching an ad because she thought that it was a legitimate fight between a student and a teacher, but it was actually just an ad for AI homework assistant. Very insidious, very nasty work. And if you actually look at the comments on the video, not many people are actually clocking that it is an ad, which is scary because it's then served its purpose of getting people to check out whatever AI homework assistant the girl's ranting about. And I say all this to say that no one is immune from propaganda, even if it's on our screens 24/7, whether we know it or not. Back in the day, YouTubers used to be hashtag not an ad or hashtag ad to distinguish if what they were saying was paid for or sponsored or not. But it's clear no one really cares about the FTC no more because no one's really disclosing ads like they used to. And it's becoming even harder to hold influencers accountable for not disclosing, especially when the content is not shaped like a traditional ad. And when I think we talk about things like influencers and propaganda, people often say that when it comes to influencers, the person themselves has actually become a walking billboard, with their lifestyle becoming the commodity, and the products that they advertise allegedly bringing us one step closer to the life they live. But in reality, no matter how many affiliate links or TikTok shop items we buy, you can't really be like that influencer because influencers are cashing in for the products that y'all are selling out. Advertising is a billion-dollar industry. Embedding and creating insecurities in people, and specifically in women, is easy when there is just that much money and a lifetime of patriarchal standards put behind it. And companies win when you feel insecure. which unfortunately isn't super different from seeing the idealistic lifestyle of your favorite lifestyle influencer and thinking you can emulate that life by buying the same product, despite the actual differences between you and them being their work, their genetics, their time and effort, and the money that's been put into it. So you really just can't buy a new workout set and then magically turn into like, I don't know, who's like a popular lifestyle girly? Yeah. This creator on TikTok speaks a little bit about it, and I don't agree with all of their points.
I made a TikTok talking about influencers make too much money, and a lot of the girlies are like, you're just mad because you want to be an influencer. You're just bitch. You could not influence a thirsty person to drink water.
But at its core, to be an influencer is to be an agent of overconsumption, which I had to say as I am one of those too. There's so much money and forces at play behind making individuals consume. But also we as individuals have to take stock and personal inventory. Like how often are we pressing that TikTok shop link and clicking buy? As this one creator puts it, consumerism is the perfection of slavery. Most media on the internet these days is trying to sell you something. And it's not just products. Beliefs, attitudes to our political topics, and lifestyles also seem to be hot commodities. Because everything is a virtue signal in this capitalist society. Where we put our time and dollar ultimately says something about us for choosing one product over another. It's like buying a Hydro Flask versus a Stanley Cup versus a off-brand name. Each choice seems to add an identity marker with the consumer. It seems like in late stage capitalism, the main way we get to express ourselves is through external consumption. What artists do you support? What car do you drive? What brands do you like and shop from the most? And which ones do you not? And which ones do you boycott? I think it's now more common than ever that identities and personalities are based in consumerism, which unfortunately is a major win for corporations, but is a massive L for us. Also a little cliff note, because I don't feel like talking about the rest of this. Fuck TikTok shop.
I'm not going to be hypocritical. It's gotten me because I'm constantly being advertised things, and a lot of these things are tailored to my interests and things I want. I really like makeup. Suddenly it's advertising all of these eyeshadow palettes, all of these different makeup products, when in reality, I don't need that many. Like, it's just so unnecessary. Use this, get this lipstick, get this blush, get this lip liner, when in reality, you can use an eyeshadow palette for blush, for lip liner, for lipstick, for contour. So many things. You don't need to be consuming this. And I think now that it was everywhere, people are getting rewarded and getting paid for promoting random just junk. It's just junk.
Now, while in late stage capitalism, it is hard to get out of the rat race of it all, my best advice for you if you are trying to seek other options is to shop small, shop local, and shop mindful, which I know all come with their own amounts of privilege and isn't possible every time for everyone. But if you have the choice to do it, our buying power is significantly stronger than you may think. So yes, maybe partake in the de-influencing content creators and slow down your shopping because you don't need to buy everything. But now let's take a big transition into one of the major discourses around this conversation, specifically around propaganda and consumption, and that is Taylor Swift. And I mean, like, what discourse hasn't been said about this album already? But I promise she really ties into this. Regardless of what you feel about her music, one thing that is undeniable about Taylor Swift is that she is a businesswoman first. And while I know the stands will come for me for this, I do want to say it is not just her that does this, but overconsumption is definitely encouraged under Miss Swiftie.
I see tactics like this, where each vinyl variant is specifically marketed as having a different song on it that isn't on the previous variant, that you know will take months and months and months to make it onto streaming, and that there will likely never be a vinyl that contains all the different songs from all the different variants in one place that is particularly manipulative. And I would be willing to bet money that this will not be the last final variant of TTPD that's released that will have something exclusive to that variant that makes fans specifically want to buy it in addition to whatever they've already bought, sight unseen or unheard or whatever. And they're just gonna buy multiple things because it's a frenzy. Not only because it's a specific variant, but also because it's released for a very limited period of time while supplies last, and you're never told when or if it will be made available again, creating a false scarcity market.
This new album has around, I think, 28 physical variants alone, all using the limited stock only. Like, this is peak overconsumption core. It's all the same songs y'all are gonna get digitally soon. And yes, bring back physical media, but why do you need 28 of the same album? And yes, there are people that are buying multiples of this. It really feels like y'all are under spells and she's exploiting your wallet. I'm an Ariana stan. I love that woman down. I stream every song, every album on repeat. And I know that she's released her variants. I'm personally not buying them. And don't get me wrong, Like if this is some indie artist, like I get it, supporting your local small artist, but can we be real? This is Taylor Swift, one of the, if not the biggest artists out right now. What are we doing with 28 versions? Like this is biblical levels of greed. And we're not even gonna talk about the waste that comes along with that. But what we are gonna talk about is Taylor Swift herself, Miss America's propaganda darling. Many people have called her out for her lukewarm white feminist stances in the era of political correctness, namely her Miss Americana documentary, when she cried about caring so much about feminism despite her family's beliefs, right? Now put that in contrast now that conservatism is in full swing, both politically and in the general zeitgeist, that she's made ties with the NFL, her circle is looking more homogenous than ever, and her lyrics are offering questionable at best and microaggressive at worst messaging. So see how there's a changing of behaviors and attitudes to meet the times? It seems that she just kind of goes wherever is most profitable at the time. Now, I know people have analyzed her lyrics to death, talking about how some of the lyrics can be seen as microaggressively racist, littered with pick-me-isms, misogyny, and generally kind of conservative, just generally keeping it interesting. But one thing that really stood out from all this is who it was coming from. She's one of the most lucrative stars, selling stadiums out. She has the life of a famous star, a life many people dream of. She's successful in her own right and has this whole empire around her, yet she's here saying that despite all of this glitz and glammy life, all she wants is to be by her man and to have his kids and to live the nuclear family in the suburbs with a basketball hoop in the backyard. And while people can aspire and wish for whatever they want, it is important to understand the times in which we are operating. It's just really interesting to hear this messaging come from someone who historically built her brand up by being this independent girl boss and is now telling her majority women fan base that, hey, even though I am like the peak independent woman and can do it all, what I really yearn for is the all-white American family dream. And if that doesn't sound like some propaganda given the times that we are currently in, I don't know what does. In an era where women's rights are being stripped, conservatives blaming women for the reason that the birth rate is so low, to the rise of things like trad wives and the ideology that like, I'm just a girl so I don't want to think or like do hard things, all of these things that seem to exist independently, all hodgepodge to a kind of problematic and regressive rhetoric if you think about it. And it's undeniable that Taylor Swift is a powerful political force. When she told people to register to vote, they took it serious. And while it's unclear to know exactly how many people were registered from her posting that, it is known that 400,000 people did click the link, which I think is important to note in the context of her impact, especially with younger demographics engaging in politics. She's positioned herself to be in a place of influence and has previously used that when it benefits her and her bottom dollar, getting her fans to support her whichever way the pendulum swings. And if the pervasive messaging right now is for motherhood, nuclear family, and nationalism, then that's where we're gonna go. All this is to say that no one is above or immune to propaganda. It is everywhere. And while some may be more sinister and insidious than others, it is still important to understand when you're being advertised to, how you're being advertised to, and why you specifically are being advertised this specific ad. Because at a time where overconsumption is at its heights, it's important to distinguish whether what you want is truly what you want or just what brands told you to.